regiment is bivouacked in these woods, your regiment, well concealed from aerial observation. Here is your squad with a light machine gun attached. Dispersed among the trees, it is about to move out on a mission into enemy territory. As a cavalryman, you must think of your horse first. You feed him before you feed yourself. Sacked grain is here in bulk, so fill your grain bag. Make sure that it's well tied both at the top and in the middle, because it will have to take some jolting. Each half of the bag holds enough grain for one feeding. Next, fill your feed bag. You should know how much grain your horse needs. How many handfuls or canteen cups of grain go into the bag for one feeding. Tie on all feed bags at the same time before any horse gets too impatient. Adjust the feed bag so that your horse can reach his feed. See that the neck strap is on top of the pole so that the bottom of the feed bag is tipped towards the horse's mouth. Fix the pole strap so that it doesn't cross the eyes, and make sure that the muzzle strap is not too tight. Your horse wants to eat, but he has to breathe too. These horses are eating quietly because their feed bags are adjusted properly. Here's what happens if the feed bag is too tight. The horse gags. If it's too loose, he'll spill the grain, tossing his head trying to reach it. Don't leave grain on the ground where the horse might eat it, or you'll have a sick animal with dirt or sand colic. A sick horse means you will have to walk. All done? Feels like it. Now take off the feed bag and clean it as if it were your mess kit. You should do it after each feeding. Otherwise, the saliva, together with the uneaten grain, may start fermentation. Turn the feed bag inside out and rub it clean and dry with some hay, grass, or leaves, and do it thoroughly. The feed bag should be washed, aired, and sunned whenever you get a chance. After you and your horse have had breakfast, you can finish packing your saddle. Check your saddle and equipment. You don't want anything to slip or any rattling to be heard by the enemy. Ordinarily, you air and brush your saddle blanket at the end of the day's march. If you've used it during the night, you'll have to shake and brush it again in the morning before saddling up. Dirty and wrinkled blankets cause sore backs. The blanket should be washed periodically with dissolved soap and cold water. After brushing, you should shake it again thoroughly. Get rid of all twigs and dirt that stick to it. It's worth taking the time to make sure that it's really clean. There's only one correct method of folding a saddle blanket. Watch carefully how it's done. Fold the blanket lengthwise. Then reduce its length to 1/3 by folding it twice again. Now is the time to really do it right. You won't have time to resaddle your horse very often on a march. Smooth the horse's hair by brushing the blanket over it from front to rear 2 or 3 times. See that it is equally distributed on both sides of the horse's back. Now you're ready to saddle. Don't try to do it alone. It takes 2 men to handle a trooper's fully packed saddle. Chances are that one man working alone will drop the saddle on the horse's back and startle him. Besides, you don't want to disturb the blanket. When the saddle is on, check it for position and balance. Make sure the hair lies smoothly. The cinch strap should be adjusted equally on both sides of the saddle. Tighten the cinch until your hand will slip snugly from rear to front between the belly and the cinch. Don't let the horse fool you by swelling. How about watering your horse before you move out? Don't do it. Water before feeding grain, never immediately after. You're ready to move out. You're on your way. Here's what you have to do to keep your horse conditioned on the march. It's a good idea to lead him for the first 3 or 4 minutes to limber up his muscles and stimulate the circulation in his hooves. At the same time, you will be able to check the action of the other horses and the adjustment of the other troopers' equipment, and they can check yours. When the squad leader gives the signal to mount, mounting is done individually, not necessarily together. You ought to walk your horse for the next 10 minutes to get his back muscles used to your weight. After the lead and walk, the gait will depend on the march schedule and terrain. You've been out for 20 or 30 minutes, and it's over an hour since feeding grain, so if you see any water, stop. First, remove the bits, being careful not to hit your horse's teeth. Ease the bits out of his mouth. You can either remove the reins or leave them around his neck. Remove the halter shank loop and hold both the loop and the bridle. Then let him drink his fill. You may have a ways to go before your first regular hourly halt. Don't forget to establish march outposts at every halt. Frequent changes between walking and trotting will rest you and your mount. Keep the point far enough ahead of you so that you're never taken by surprise. What the point sees will often decide the gait to be used. If you have to cross dangerous exposed areas, you should gallop. The gallop is not a marching gait. It should be used as little as possible, but there are times when it becomes necessary, and this is one of them. Also, galloping is used to side slip or escape the enemy. During the first hour, you usually march about 40 minutes, alternating the walk and trot. How much you trot depends on how far you have to go in an hour. If you are on a march schedule over a predetermined route and you run into very bad going, don't insist on maintaining your scheduled gait and direction. Decrease the gait and change direction until the terrain improves again. Then take up the former gait and direction. To balance the work on the horse's legs, trot on the right diagonal one period and on the left diagonal the next. Time to halt after about 40 minutes of riding. These woods are a good spot for a 15-minute rest period. This is the time to care for your horse and readjust your equipment. But don't just dismount and stop. It is always better to lead your horse into a halt in order to relieve the load on his back gradually and relax his muscles as well as your own. At the halt, remove the side loads from the pack animals. Loosen the cinches. Check all the equipment, as bad adjustment will usually show up in the first hour. But you will still have to recheck your equipment at every hourly halt. Then each hoof must be carefully inspected for stones by cleaning with the currycomb hoof hook, or a whittled stick, or a handy spike carried in your pocket. While cleaning the hooves, look for loose shoes. Here's one. The time you spent, or should have spent, watching the horseshoer back in the troop will pay off now. Get the wire cutters from the corporal and a spare set of shoes. Use the wire cutters as a clinching block and the spare shoes as a hammer. Here's a practical example of a field expedient. When all the nails are driven home, reverse the hoof and knock down the clinches. After the first halt, you'll march 50 or 55 minutes and halt only 5 or 10 minutes each hour. If you run into rocky ground or steep hillsides, you should be alert for the clicking sound of a loose shoe. Also, watch the horses around you for lost shoes. If a shoe is lost, you can do one of two things. If the terrain ahead is hard and rocky, you should nail on a fitted shoe. If the going is good and the remaining time on the march not too long, the shoe need not be replaced right away, but the sharp edge of the hoof should be rounded off. With a long march still ahead, you should put on a shoe. Watch how it's done. Never place the nail with the flat side facing inwards. The flat side of the nail must face outward, or the nail will turn in and penetrate the quick, causing severe injury. Ordinarily, inexperienced men should not try to nail on a shoe. However, every mounted man should know how to shoe a horse in an emergency. Drive the first nail into the third hole on one side. Then drive the second nail in on the opposite side and continue back and forth until all the nails are driven in. Then reverse the hoof, snip off the ends, and knock down the clinches. The entrance and exit of a stream crossing, as well as the ford itself, may be treacherous ground. In a spot like this, your horse could lose a shoe. As soon as you have put out a march outpost, halt, examine the shoes, and check for any equipment out of adjustment. Muddy going after a heavy rain will often cause loose shoes to be pulled off. Under such conditions, halt and check at frequent intervals. It's a good idea to reconnoiter all fords before the patrol starts across. The first hour was easy, but now you've been out for over 4 hours, moving fast, and the weather is hot. You've got to be alert for signs of heat exhaustion, staggering or wobbly gait in hind quarters. Watch for dilated nostrils and drawn expression. Body muscles that tremble, thumps, or rapid breathing. All are sure signs of heat exhaustion, and here's what you should do about it. Rest your horse. Get him into the shade and call for help immediately. Get his equipment off in a hurry. Then do everything you can to cool him off. Apply water to the head, sides of the neck, loins, and flanks. Give him 3 or 4 swallows of water every few minutes. As he begins to feel better, cover him with a blanket to keep him warm. Then rub his legs and body to prevent chilling. While the horses are resting and cooling off, you'll have time to readjust your saddle if you work in pairs. Whenever you remove the saddle, always check the withers and backs for bumps and abrasions. Then see that the blanket is clean and properly folded before you put it back on the horse. Check the front of the sidebar of the saddle to see that it isn't too close to the shoulder blade. Watch that the blanket is far enough to the rear to prevent the saddlebags from chafing the flanks. Just before moving out, test the tightness of the cinch and adjust the saddlebag straps. When the weather is hot and the pace is fast, it is important that you water your horse frequently. Watering at least once during the march is essential, even if the weather is cool. There's your march outpost security while watering. Unbridle before you lead your horses to water. Otherwise, if they're very thirsty, they'll drag you into the water before you know it. Give your horse a break. Dismount and remove the bits before you let him drink. Move out promptly after watering to prevent chilling and possible foundering. At noontime, halting depends on the situation, the weather, and the length of your march. In moderate weather, you end the march early in the afternoon instead of halting at noon. On a forced march, in moderate weather like this, you could well halt for an hour or more. This corporal decides to make a long halt. In hot weather, the horse's back will be sweaty, so the blanket should be reversed before you put it back on, to prevent chilling if you're in the shade, to prevent blistering if you are in the sun. Tighten the surcingle just enough to keep the blanket from slipping. Grazing will provide the roughage and bulk your horse needs to maintain his flesh and help his digestion of grain. Graze at every opportunity. After about 20 minutes of grazing, give him a drink. You can water after feeding hay or grass. Then give him his noon feed of grain, half the grain in the grain bag. You're on your way again. Here's a place where it would be easier to stay in the saddle. Easier for you. But the horses would have to strain too hard and might injure their tendons. When you've climbed the hill, you can mount up. Don't start trotting right away. Walk the horses for a while. Give them a chance to catch their breath. See that trooper slouching? No matter how tired you are, there's only one correct position. Never slouch in the saddle. Slouching will cause saddle sores. When there is no watering place and your horse is thirsty, give him some of the water in your canteen. Just a few short swallows after removing the bits. Take what's left in the helmet to swab out his eyes and nostrils. Use your head in selecting a rate of march. Don't follow your prearranged march schedule blindly. Don't try to go over 4 miles an hour at the walk. That holds good even on long, forced marches. Trot at 8 miles an hour. Too fast a pace will show up in excess sweating, thumps, and overheating. The day's march has come to an end. The squad leader has picked his first bivouac site. Dismount and loosen the cinches a couple of holes. Let your horse cool off as you lead him in for grooming and feeding. This place offers both cover and concealment. There's protection from wind and sun and good standing for horses. The horses can be well dispersed and tied to trees instead of on squad picket lines. The patrol leader immediately reconnoiters for a good watering place. And there's water, a fine, clear stream with firm footing for your horse. When working alone, it is good practice to lighten the saddle before you take it off. Remove the cantle roll first so that it is ready for pitching shelter tents if desired while the horses are cooling off. Always keep your rifle on you or near you. Lay your bridle down so that the reins don't get tangled. Before you take off the saddle, cross the cinch over it so that it won't drag in the dirt. The cinch should be dried, brushed, and occasionally washed. Spread the saddle skirts out flat. Keep all your equipment together and nearby so that you'll be able to find it quickly if you have to move out in a hurry, especially in the dark. If your blanket slipped and fell on the ground, clean it first. Then reverse it without unfolding it. Check the horse's back for swelling and bruises before you put it on again. But remember, the quicker you can get it back on, the better. It'll prevent bunches, chills, and stiffness. Your common sense will tell you that when you're tired, your horse is tired too and probably hungry. Take care of him unless you want to walk tomorrow. Get some forage. Straw is not the best feed, but it will do in a pinch. Grass is better, grass or hay. Use a bolo or machete to cut it. Grass or other roughage helps digestion of the concentrated grain ration. Relax your horse's muscles by rubbing the legs. It'll give him the same lift you get out of a cigarette. Use a gentle, firm, continued rubbing motion, working downward. In the meantime, your horse will have cooled off and dried out. Remove the blanket and spread it out to air and dry. Then examine your horse for injuries. Here's a swollen back caused by excess pressure at one point under the saddle, poor packing, or a trooper riding in a slouched position. First aid is a cold pack. Use your grooming cloth and keep it wet. Quick action will reduce the swelling. Here's another use for your surcingle. See what happens to a horse's back that doesn't get proper care? After a hard ride, take a handful of hay or grass and rub his back dry, leaving his coat rough. Then use your hands in a circular motion to massage the muscles. Don't slap him or rub too roughly. Don't beat him. You don't want to hurt your horse, you want to help him. Now clean the hooves. Move the hook from heel to toe. Be careful not to deepen the cleft of the frog or scrape away the protective horn in the grooves on either side of the frog. Dirt left in these grooves often causes thrush, a decay of the frog which will lay up your horse. You can detect thrush by its foul odor. Take your curry comb and break up the caked dirt under the coat on the well-padded parts. Be easy on his back. Don't use it on the tail or the head or on any bony parts of his body or legs. The brush is the mainstay of the grooming kit. Don't brush dirt into the horse's coat. Flip it away at the end of each stroke and clean the brush on the curry comb teeth after every few strokes. Brushing will tone up the muscles as well as clean the skin. After the grooming has been completed, the patrol leader will probably inspect the horses, feel under the jaws, between the forelegs, behind the elbows, inside the hind legs, and the dock. They are the places most frequently overlooked in grooming. Watering time now. Notice the horses aren't tied together. If they were and broke away from you, they might get badly hurt. And they could not drink comfortably tied together because they hardly ever raise their heads at the same time. Water a few horses at a time. Bring them up together. Let them drink their fill. Then take them away together. Meanwhile, keep the other horses well back from the watering point to prevent restlessness and jamming up. When the first group has finished watering and been led away, bring the next group down quietly. Get your drinking and cooking water upstream. Use purifying tablets if available when filling canteens. Farther downstream is the watering place for horses. Still further downstream, you can wash your clothes, bathe yourself, or shave. You and your soap should be the furthest downstream, as horses don't like to drink soapy water any more than you do. After watering, dry the legs with straw, grass, or grooming cloth. Especially in cold weather, wet or muddy legs may result in a disease called scratches. The pasterns become reddened and swollen like chapped hands, and lameness results. Now you're ready for your evening feed. Give your horse the other half of the grain in the grain bag. Then check your equipment for needed repairs. Clean your saddle blanket and all your leather. Water and sand with a little elbow grease will remove the caked saliva from your bits. Dirty bits may cause infection. After dark, move your horses and equipment to a new bivouac, just in case the first one was spotted during daylight by the enemy. When settling your horse for the night, tie him carefully so he can't injure himself. Here's the rule. Allow 2 or 3 inches from the snap to the ground as the rope hangs loosely from the tree or picket line. Too long a rope, he may cast himself or get a rope burn. Too short, he can't reach his forage. He may strangle trying to lie down. When it's your turn to be picket line guard, it's your job to check the tying of the horses, to keep rough forage in front of them, and to see to it that they remain quiet. Proper care of horses means a lot of hard work. Watering and feeding, grooming and first aid, taking care of equipment, adjustment of the saddle. On the march, it'll pay off. You're a cavalryman, and your horse is your transportation. Keep him in top condition, and he'll do his job. He'll get you out of tight spots and bring you back safely. Take care of him like you take care of yourself, and you'll be a winning team.